We are now 4 weeks into the NFL season, and a lot has taken place in a short amount of time. Some teams like the Minnesota Vikings are off to terrific starts despite the media thinking they may be in for a last place division finish, while the Jacksonville Jaguars have had a genuinely terrible start. Not every team entered the year with Super Bowl expectations, as some teams like the Arizona Cardinals are very clearly rebuilding, while teams like the Kansas City Chiefs are competing for a Super Bowl. Obviously, we all know there can only be one Super Bowl champion each and every year, but the reality is there's probably a dozen teams, if not more, that legitimately think they are going to win the Super Bowl this year. And to be honest, they have to. They can't enter the facility on a Monday and say, oh well, we play a tough team this week and we're going to lose because we're not good enough to beat them. That's not how the NFL works. And in today's video, we're going to break down the biggest threats to 4 NFL teams that internally think they can win the big game this year. And there is a lot to dive into with each of the 4 teams, and without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video by discussing the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys are 2-2 after a win over the Giants on Thursday night in Week 4 with a score of 20-15. And Dallas started their year off with a win over the Browns back in Week 1, and they looked good in that game. But since then, it's been an up and down ride with a lot more downs than ups. And I have a few concerns with this team as we transition to the middle of the season. Dallas has ran for 100 yards just once in their first 4 games, and that was against Cleveland back in Week 1. Even within that game, Dallas ran for just 102 yards. Breaking that down even further, CeeDee Lamb had 25 of the team's rushing yards, and one of my biggest concerns for Dallas is they are insanely one-dimensional on offense, and they're not going to do anything of note unless this changes, which it's not, at least not in 2024. Dallas is averaging just 3.5 yards per carry, and their leading rusher through 4 weeks is Rico Dowdle, who has just 134 rushing yards by the way. This offense is insanely reliant on Dak Prescott, and while Dak will put up numbers, as that's never been a question, the media pressure and the jokes people get in about this team not going to an NFC Championship game since the 90s are not going to stop this year either. The only way it would stop is if Dak has one of the best games in his career in back-to-back weeks in the postseason, meaning in each of the wildcard and divisional round. And thinking out loud, I don't think the Cowboys would beat a combination of the Lions, Seahawks, 49ers, Packers, or Vikings in back-to-back games, again, just to get to the NFC Championship game. I also really worry about their rookie left tackle Tyler Guyton as well. Like you would expect from a rookie left tackle who was drafted near the end of the first round, and for the tackle who is the 7th tackle off the board, he struggled through the first 4 games at times and has been credited with allowing 4 sacks in 4 games. There were a couple of reps in particular against Kayvon Thibodeaux in Week 4 where KT was really taking him to school, and I think that's very concerning for the season-long outlook of the Cowboys because Kayvon is not a particularly great edge rusher. I was happy for KT in this game, but his struggles in the NFL have been well documented, and there's patches of games where you flat out do not notice him, but he got the best of Guyton multiple times. Terrence Steele has also had a particularly rough start to the 24 season, and I personally never thought Dallas was going to go to the Super Bowl this year, but I thought they would be playing better than they are through the first 4 games. Their schedule doesn't relent either, as they play both the Steelers and Lions before their Week 7 bye, and there is a non-zero chance this team enters their bye with a 2-4 record. It is unfortunate for the Cowboys that they will likely be without both Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence until after their Week 7 bye, and this is per Tom Pelissero, but neither of those guys have anything to do with the problems Dallas has offensively. Dallas has a particularly tough stretch coming up, and I don't think they're going to have enough in the tank to beat other great NFL teams. The Baltimore Ravens absolutely dismantled the Buffalo Bills in Week 4 to the tune of a 35-10 victory and looked like the team we knew they could be all along. It's not an exaggeration to say there is no other NFL team like the Baltimore Ravens. No other team is close to having a Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry on their roster, and the only team that's close is the Washington Commanders, whose quarterback and running back duo is Jaden Daniels and Brian Robinson Jr. And while I like Brian Robinson Jr., there is a big difference between him and King Henry. And over the last 2 games, Baltimore's rushing attack has really come to life as they've ran for over 270 yards in each each of those games. Not surprisingly, they won both and put up 63 combined points. And when the Ravens play like this, their biggest threat, as simple as this sounds, is themselves. There's not many teams that's going to be able to beat a healthy Baltimore Ravens team like this, and I will say for the sake of Bills fans that not having 3 defensive starters against Baltimore was obviously going to impact the game, but especially when it's 3 of your best defensive starters in Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, and Taron Johnson. What also scares me for the Ravens is their coaching staff at times can press, and we've seen that in 2 of the first 4. They should have never lost to the Raiders, and the Cowboys game was a lot more nerve-wracking for the Ravens team and their fan base than it should have been. Not every game is going to be like the Bills game in Week 4, where you hold an MVP candidate's offense to just 236 total yards and 12 first downs, and send a message by being the more physically dominant team, and I do worry about the coaching staff in the games coming up against the Bengals, Commanders, and Bucks. And it's because of how many losses they've had by way of blowing a double-digit lead since the start of the 2021 season. They've lost 9 games in which they've had a double-digit lead since the start of the 21 season, and I think the worry with this will wear off with time, but it is worth noting. And as much as we criticize Todd Monken for the 2023 AFC Championship game, in which Baltimore running backs ran the ball a total of 6 times, I think the Ravens are starting to realize how simple their offense should be, and it's to run the football until the defense proves they can stop you. And if anyone remembers the old Marshawn Lynch clip of running the ball through an individual's face, that is definitely paraphrasing there, that's how the 2024 Ravens should play. I have no concerns with the talent on this roster, and I think it's one of the most complete rosters in the league, and even when Mark Andrews looks to be done or looks to be a tad over the hill, they have his replacement on the roster in Isaiah Likely. The human element in football is very real, and there's a reason the games are played and not on paper. The biggest threat to me for the 24 Ravens is the coaching staff getting too cute with it or shooting themselves in the foot time and time again. They're a very good team, and they have the talent to win the Super Bowl. Up I-95 to Philly to discuss the Birds and the potential problems the Eagles may face. We're not going to focus too much on the Bucs game from Week 4 because they were out 3 big offensive starters in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and future Hall of Famer Lane Johnson. It's already hard enough to win a game when your top 2 receivers are missing, let alone when it's one of the best duos in the league. But what we will focus on is a few things that surfaced in this game with or without the 3 starters. Not having AJ or Devontae doesn't change the concern I have with Jalen Hurts' pocket presence. Jalen was sacked 6 times in this game, and they weren't all on the offensive line. He was also just 6 of 14 for 53 yards under pressure, and I will acknowledge I think that improves with both receivers playing, but the pocket presence is what I worry about most for the sake of the Eagles' season. I have a lot of concerns with the defense and ultimately the coaching staff too. After they put up 34 points against the Packers in Week 1, and in a game where they didn't start off great, I thought this team could build on that and legitimately make a run, strictly due to how talented this roster is. But after a few more weeks, there's glaring problems that can't be ignored. The defense hasn't been great outside of one game, which was the New Orleans game. That was one of Jalen Carter's best games as a pro, but expecting that every single week is not a realistic scenario. In the other 3 games, they've allowed at least 385 yards or more defensively, and it was highlighted by a 445 total yard game by the Bucs in Week 4. They've only forced 2 turnovers in 4 games, and the Eagles have had a big problem turning the ball over offensively, as they've committed 8 turnovers in 4 games, which, as you can expect, is near the bottom of the league. I also really worry about Nick Sirianni and the future he has with this organization. I don't think he's going to be a Super Bowl winning head coach, and I think there's times where he outthinks a situation and ends up with a terrible result. The end of the first half against the Saints is most notable because the Eagles were in the midst of a 15-play drive and had a 4th and 1 on the Saints' 15-yard line with 15 seconds left in the first half. They went for it and didn't get it and left points on the board. And even if they got it, did it really matter if they had a 26-yard field goal instead of a 32-yard field goal? I personally trust Jake Elliott in both situations, and these are the type of decisions that lose games. The Eagles dominating the Saints as much as they did and only winning by 3 is the epitome as to why I'm worried about this team in the long run. They have 0 first quarter points all year, and since their game in Brazil, they have 52 points in 3 games, which equates to just 17.3 per game. And again, if you want to exclude the Bucs game because of the 3 big starters out, which is a quarter of their sample size at this point, then they have 38 points in the 2 non-Brazil games. I really worry about this team's defense, and Bryce Huff has been an absolute disaster since joining the team this offseason. Their defense is simply predicated on Jalen Carter making a big play, Josh Sweat getting a pressure, and praying everything holds up in the back end. I think Quinyon Mitchell has done alright as a rookie corner, but when we talk about setting your players up for success, the Eagles' pass rush hasn't been there, and it's not setting Quinyon or anybody else up for success in the secondary either. I think the Eagles have a lot of problems, and the coaching has played a big part into why the Eagles have disappointed to start the year. The New York Jets are in today's video for several reasons, but it boils down to the coaching staff. The loss to Denver in Week 4 with a score of 10-9 is nothing short of embarrassing, especially for where this team thinks they are and where they think they are headed, or at least where they thought they were headed with the preseason expectations. This team had a Super Bowl or bust mentality, and it makes sense. They went all in. They brought in Aaron Rodgers to win a Super Bowl. They didn't bring Aaron Rodgers to go 9-8 and lose in the wild card round and say, good effort, guys, we'll see you next year. And I think what was the most frustrating part in the Broncos game, well, there's a couple of things, but Breece Hall having 10 carries for 4 yards in what's been a big slump of a year, or a start to the year for Breece Hall, and Garrett Wilson also having a disappointing start to the season as well. I thought there was a legit chance the Jets would have not one, but maybe 2 players in the Offensive Player of the Year conversation this year, with those, of course, being Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson. But one of the most frustrating drive sequences for the Jets during the Broncos game was the fact that they had first and goal on Denver's 1. It was a 0-0 game, and the Jets obviously lost by a single point. They had first and goal at the 1. They gave the ball to Breece twice. Credit Denver's defense, they made a good defensive stand. But even that choice to give Breece Hall the football after the type of year he's had is kind of frustrating in itself, because Braylon Allen is a much bigger back. I mean, Braylon Allen is very similar to the size of Derrick Henry, and if you give Braylon Allen the football on the 1-yard line 4 times, and Denver stops him 4 times, left hand up, credit to Denver, and that's one heck of a defensive stand. And even if you wanted to have Tyrod Taylor go in and do 4 quarterback sneaks, because I completely understand not wanting to have Aaron Rodgers in a quarterback sneak situation, or even give him the ball in a quarterback sneak. I get it. He's 40 years old. He's coming off a torn Achilles. There's a reason the Chiefs don't have Patrick Mahomes do quarterback sneaks, and also the Falcons with Kirk coming off a torn Achilles. I get it. I'm not going to sit here and say, Aaron Rodgers, you need to toughen up and just do a quarterback sneak because you're paid a lot of money to be the quarterback of the New York Jets. That's not me, and I understand the thought process there. But even if you give the ball to Tyrod 4 times, not getting a touchdown out of that was the difference in not winning a game against the Broncos. And guys, this is the Broncos. This isn't the Kansas City Chiefs. This isn't the Buffalo Bills, who the New York Jets are very much looking up to in the division, by the way. And what also is frustrating about this loss to the Broncos in Week 4 was Bo Nix when not targeting Courtland Sutton in Week 4. This is not made up. When not targeting Courtland Sutton in Week 4, Bo Nix was 9 of 16, not bad, with 0 passing yards, 0 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. And that is who you lost to, as a team that expects to be a Super Bowl contender. And not only that, but my other frustration with the Jets that I thought would go down after an offseason, after, hey, let's regroup and let's just get everything back together. This team is so incredibly undisciplined week in and week out. And even in that sequence, by the way, that we just discussed on the goal line, they had 3rd and goal, and it was a terrible play-action passing call. Rodgers didn't have a chance from the start, and he took an unnecessary quarterback hit. So there's another great play call by Nathaniel Hackett to have your 40-year-old quarterback take a big unnecessary hit. But on 4th and goal, they had a false start. And I get that false starts are going to happen here and there. Players are human, and there's a reason games are played. But guys, the amount of penalties that the Jets sustained against Denver in Week 4, which was double digits, by the way, is unacceptable for a home game. And this is against a team that will probably finish with a top 10 pick. I don't want to say top 5 for Denver, but probably top 10. And they went into MetLife and won 10-9 in a game that Credit Denver's defense, by the way, but in a game you should have won, and that's my biggest frustration. And when you look at the Jets' next 3 games, which are against the Vikings, Bills, and Steelers, I would be pretty surprised if they're not 3-4. Do we really trust Nathaniel Hackett against a Brian Flores defense? Do we really trust the Jets against the Bills on Monday night? And even the Steelers defense, who had a down week against Indy in week 4, but their defense is really, really good. And the Jets' biggest threat at this point in the season is their coaching staff. To come out undisciplined every single week and to say in post-game press conferences, we got to clean it up, we practiced hard this week, and we'll get back out there next week and give it a all. At what point do we demand better results from the New York Jets? There has been an enormous amount of disappointment to start the year, and I would be surprised if the Jets win a playoff game, ultimately because I don't think the coaching staff has what it takes to consistently win in the NFL. I think the talent is there, and I will say the Broncos defense played a really good game in week 4, but I mean, guys, we're talking about the Denver Broncos led by Bo Nix, who went into MetLife and beat you with the score of 10-9 while throwing for 0 passing yards outside of throwing to his number 1 receiver. That's where the 2024 New York Jets are at this point in time. And they have a very tough 3-game stretch coming up, and I had the max at a wild card exit, but guys, I don't even know if they're going to make the playoffs at this point in time. This situation right now is a disaster. The offense is atrocious outside of one game against a team that is one of the worst in the league. And one of the main reasons they won the Titans game back in week 2 was because of Will Levis making a Will Levis play. I mean, they were in the red zone, and sure, you can make the argument that the Jets may have won that game regardless, but for Will Levis to make the play that he did against the Jets and to, kind of take 7 points off the board and have that be a big swing in itself, those are your 2 wins. Against the Titans in a game where Will Levis made a god-awful play, and against the Patriots, who are a bad football team in 2024. And I have a lot of concerns with the Jets moving forward, and the biggest threat to them, without a doubt, is the coaching staff continuously letting them down. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and if you did, please like and subscribe, as only about 33% of people watching are subscribed. It helps the channel tremendously. Until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.